Tanya Janca, and today I want to talk to you about security metrics that matter. So I'm going to explain what that means. I'm going to talk about all different types of security metrics, how we can get them, what we can use them for. Spoiler alert, it's so we can be more awesome. And then what you can do. So let's just start. So I'm the type of public speaker that likes to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I tell you, then I'll tell you what I told you, because I really want to emphasize certain points and make sure you remember them after you leave. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about the value of measurement and reporting versus improvement. They're not quite the same thing. We're going to talk about which metrics you want, how to get them, and how to make sure they actually matter to you, because there's metrics that seem really nice but don't actually help you, and we don't want those. Then I'm going to give you a case study. And so I actually have like 4 different things that I mashed into one. So 4 different experiences from different companies that I worked with. And so I mashed it into one case study because most people won't let you do 4 case studies in the same talk. And so, yeah, I'm like pretty excited to share all of this with you. So you're probably thinking, who the heck is this Tanya lady? So everyone that does these presentations, they do the About Me slide. And the reason they do it is to try to explain to you that we are totally qualified to give our own talk. I didn't used to understand. I would go to presentations and I would think, why are they telling me their resume? I don't care. Just show me how to hack that cool thing. And then I understood, and it was explained to me, it's the I'm qualified to give this talk. So I founded my own training company. So we do on-demand and live training called We Hack Purple. We have a community. We do all sorts of stuff. I'm known as She Hacks Purple on the internet. And yes, some of my hair is violet. I wrote a book and it hit bestseller, and that's very exciting. And it's called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And like, that's all I really talk about is the security of software generally. So it makes sense I would write a book about that. I've worked in tech a long time. I'm one of the founders of WoSec. I started an OS chapter and a project, and I blog and stream, and I'm basically a nerd on the internet. That's, if I go to a party, so obviously with COVID, I don't go to a lot of parties right now, but people are like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm a nerd on the internet. I don't know how to describe what I do. I'm obsessed with the security of software. And so hopefully you're like, nah, she seems all right. She seems fine. She's probably qualified to give this talk. So let's continue. Metrics. Okay, so metrics are sometimes referred to like the way that you measure something or the results obtained from measuring. And so we're going to talk about the second one. So when I talk about metrics, it's not, well, we are going to talk a bit about how to measure things, but we're mostly going to talk about the results from measurement, the data that we get and how we can go use it to scale our security programs, our efforts, and up our security posture. So the value of metrics. So we measure so that we can report to our bosses and so that we can have data that we can use to improve our work. So the reason why I'm differentiating these two is because you might gather all the same data, but it will look different when you report it versus when we use it to improve. So just to repeat, because I think I'm going to repeat this maybe one more time on the next slide, but reporting's for management and improvement is for us, the boots on the ground, the hands on the keyboard, the ones doing the work. We need that data too, but we're going to look at it in a different way. So reporting means I can get money for budget, for tools, for staff, for other resources that I want. When I worked at Microsoft, I was a dev advocate, but I was the only security one. And my boss was like, you keep telling me how, we absolutely need another security person, but you haven't really made it clear to me. So I made this folder called Can't. And so every time there was a thing where I just couldn't do it, I put it in this folder. And so after a while, the folder was full. And I said, see, this is how many opportunities we've missed out on because I can't do the thing because there's just one of me. And then they hired another security advocate and we became besties and life was much better. Reporting is sometimes has to do with compliance and audit, and that means you better darn well do it, even if it's not super fun. And reporting makes our bosses happy, and we must check this box. I know that I know that doesn't sound good, but like when you report up to management the awesomeness that you do, they're like, who needs a raise? Tanya needs a raise. It really does help. But we, again, just to be clear, reports are for bosses and metrics are for us. So if you're a CISO in this room, you might be thinking, oh, the reports are for me, but the metrics might be for you as well, because you are in charge of the security programs. So you can have the best of both worlds depending upon your team and how you can get them to report to you. So briefly, I want to talk about vanity metrics. So I have worked at places where we took vanity metrics. So first of all, let me define that for you. So it's numbers that make us look good, but they're not actually valuable. So it doesn't actually help us improve. It doesn't actually tell us something. So an example of this, when I worked in the Canadian government, I was there a long time and I held many roles. But at one point, so Canada is French, English bilingual. And so if you want to work in the government, you have to be able to speak both languages if you want to be a manager. And so I was managing a team for a while, and but because of the language requirements, I was doing it for a while, but then because the manager had gone on leave and turns out it wasn't coming back. And so I was acting for a while and I could speak French, so I could do the job. But then they're like, we want to give someone else a try so he can have some experience. And so he was explaining to me, so we're having our first meeting with the big boss to do a Passover. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to show him the circle of threat. And he shows me this report, this one page, and it's just a big circle and it's got arrows. And so there's like this much yellow, this much orange, and like that much red. And then there's percentages. And I was like, what is that crap? And he's like, it's the circle of threat. Executives love pictures. And so I made him a picture and I'm like, what does it mean? And he's like, oh, this, we have this percentage of lows and this percentage of highs. And I'm like, of what? Compared to what? What was it last month? What will it be this month? What is your plan to change this? And percentage, like, what does that mean? Has that come up over time? And so I asked all sorts of data questions. And he's like, none of that matters. Executives are stupid. And I was like, oh, actually, our boss is super smart. Anyway, so we go in the meeting. I'm like, he's not going to like that. And he's like, don't worry, man, I got this. And so we go into the meeting and he shows him the circle of threats, or the threat circle. And the director looks at him and looks at me and I'm like, I did not make this crap, right? Like, I'm like, I don't know what to say. And he's like, you know that this circle is crap, right? And it doesn't actually relate any useful information. He's like, do you think that because I'm an executive, I just want to see pretty pictures? He's like, get out of my office. I mean, I told him our boss was really smart, right? Like, I don't know how I could have helped him. I told him not to do it. But anyway, so that's vanity metrics. It's data, but it's not actually helpful data. So let me give you a couple more examples so that you can really understand like what is a vanity metric versus a metric that actually helps you. So I used to work at another place, and so I've worked in tech since 1997. So I've worked at a couple places, and so one place I was working, I was creating technical documentation about how to secure our products. And one of my colleagues, he was doing technical documentation about basically like how to do certain things with our products, and he was getting like 5,000 clicks per article. And we had this big dashboard where they would measure us and we would all look at it all the time. And I was like, I'm getting like 300-400 clicks per article. That's so sad compared to him. And I had more followers online and I had a lot of readers of my blog. So I was pretty surprised that my clicks were so low. I'm disappointed. And so I met with him and was like, hey, how are you doing that? Because that's amazing. And he was awesome and was like, yeah, I just share everything on Reddit. I get almost all my clicks on Reddit. And I was like, oh, cool. So I started putting stuff there, and Reddit is Reddit, so they were very mean to me. And that's not the point. But we looked at this and I was like, you know what though? The purpose of us measuring all these things is to find out if people are getting value from it. So I asked the people collecting the metrics, could you tell me how long people are staying on average on each of our sites? And it turned out people on my articles were staying 3-4 minutes for every visit, which means they were reading the whole article on average, which was awesome. That's what I wanted. But he actually had what we would call bounces. So people were staying 1 second or less on his average time on his page was 1 second, which means basically 0 of them were reading it. And let's just say he was distraught. That was not all what he wanted. And so it turned out, like, we found out basically like people on Reddit would click a lot, but almost none of them would actually read. And it turned out people that would actually read the articles were more on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so we both basically just like melded our strategies together, and then his read time went way up and my click time got higher, and we started basically just getting way better results, and that was what our job was. And so if we just looked at the number of clicks, it would have looked like he was totally kicking butt, but it was just a vanity metric. It didn't actually tell him the thing he needed to do to make sure his job was going well. And so when we dove deeper into what do we really want, we want people to read these articles and get value. We want people to not have to call support because the articles are so good, they know what to do. And so then we could prove to management what we were doing was working. And that was awesome. Okay, so another story. When I first started managing security incidents, it was, so I went to a place that had just established their incident process, and it was kind of rocky and not that great. And I implemented basically a report for every security incident. So there's an incident report, then we would have a postmortem meeting, even if it was just 20 minutes, and I would write a postmortem report. And then after 90 days, I would go through them every 90 days to see basically what happened. And I started categorizing the types of incidents we had. And I think at the 6-month point, maybe it was the 4 or 5 month point, I went and I looked at the categories and I was like, oh my gosh, all of our worst incidents were application security incidents. And I'd been on the dev team and then moved to the security team, and I was just doing we were a very small team. And so everyone wore every security hat. So I was doing everything, but I realized we had spent a ton of money, time, and we'd had a lot of damage because of our problems with super basic AppSec. And so I prepared a report and I brought to the executives and I said, I have something to report to you. And I showed them, this is how much our AppSec incidents cost. And I can launch a very simple AppSec program that I believe could prevent any of these from ever happening again, like any of these basic things, very easily in the amount of my contract that I have left, because it was a 2-year contract and I had 5 months left on my contract. And I'd actually completed the 2 big projects that they wanted. And I was like, those projects are done. This is what I want to work on. And I was like, so if you want to think about it, blah, blah, blah. And so the 3 executives look at each other and they're like, no, it costs way less to just, like, we're going to pay her till the end of her contract anyway. We didn't have a big specific project we needed her to do. Like, there's 100 projects, but we hadn't picked one. And they're like, yeah, this seems like a great return on investment. They're like, do it. And I got to launch my first AppSec program. And it was the metrics and the numbers that helped me do it. And so that was awesome. Okay, so this is one that I see at a lot of clients over and over. So they'll tell me like, oh, the number of vulnerabilities we find every month is either going up or going down. And then they'll tell me why that's great. And I'm like, okay, so the number of vulnerabilities went up. Why is this good? And they're like, because we're finding more. And I'm like, okay, so are you finding more because you have another tool and it's finding more? No. Did you hire a pen tester to come in? No. So did you, have you launched more security testing activities or done something to find more vulnerabilities? No. So it sounds like maybe people are just making more mistakes. So maybe that's not good. Or the vulnerabilities are going down. Okay, why are they going down? Are they going down because you did a bunch of education on a bunch of topics and then they start disappearing? Are the number of the number of vulnerabilities going down because someone turned off a bunch of tests in the pipelines and you haven't noticed yet, because that's sometimes what happened. Or is the number of vulnerabilities going down because, one team isn't reporting or the metrics aren't going into your system? When you suss out things like this, you want to think about what your goal is and why it's good or bad that these numbers are happening. And you want to have more than one field that you're looking at. So if you're finding lots of new vulnerabilities and you just got a new tool and start testing everything, and all those new vulnerabilities are things it's finding, that's awesome. You're finding tons of things that you couldn't find before. But if you did not do a thing to find new vulnerabilities, that means you're just making more. Just the same as you wouldn't believe just how many times I've seen devs just turn off security tools, or they go at another place where they're like, oh yeah, we have no highs, we're doing great. And I went into Jira and one dev who I had quite a discussion with had gone in and just marked everything that was high and medium as fixed. He hadn't fixed any of them. He did that because he wanted to push his build out and he wasn't allowed to because he had high and medium security vulnerabilities. And so he's just like fixed. And meanwhile, the project manager is like, we're awesome, Tanya, we did this. And I was like, how did he fix all of those in one day? I need to go look. And so don't take your numbers at face value, go investigate and make sure they're accurate. And when specifically if vulnerabilities go up or down, you need to look at other data around it to see why, and then whether that's good news or bad news. Okay, so I want you to think about your program goals. So whether you are a person that does security awareness training, whether you are a blue teamer that is basically, setting up our firewalls and other things like that. Maybe you're a SOC analyst, maybe you work in application security, maybe you're a red teamer. Think about the goals of your program and figure out what you think can help you reach those goals, and then measure it. Measure everything you're doing, and then you'll start seeing, oh, this really works. Oh, that really doesn't work like I thought it would. Because sometimes, we buy this amazing brand new tool or we hire this amazing consultant, but we're not actually getting the things out of it that we want. We don't want to spend $200,000 on a tool. We don't want to check a box. We want our organization to be safer. And so we're going to circle back to the idea of your program goals, but if you could think about them while we go through this, I think that will help a lot. Okay, so next. So metrics and measurement are not quite the same thing. So if I am going to work with a big org, I often ask if they want to have their own in-house risk score. So there are a lot of places that have different types of, how do I explain it? So they have different risks facing their business. So let's say you work at a top secret organization for your government. They have some pretty high security posture and serious security requirements. But if you work at a small shop that sells, designer ice cream flavors on the internet, you do want to protect your stuff, but you don't necessarily need to protect it at the same level. And so quite often you can make your own in-house risk score if you are a big enough organization with a big enough security team so that you actually know how it will affect your business and affect the specific application versus whatever automated tools spit out. So again, if you're a small shop, don't do this. You don't need to do this. But if you're a big shop, or if you have intense security needs, so for instance, the whole huge things with SolarWinds recently. So SolarWinds, so many other companies depend on SolarWinds and they build their stuff using SolarWinds. And so SolarWinds has a very special business case compared to, someone selling really cool ice cream on the internet. And because of that, their risk posture is much higher and much more intense. So let's look at some things that we could base an in-house risk score on. So first of all, we want to base it on how easy can you exploit whatever vulnerability or threat or risk that you've thought of or found. is this public or is it actually, let's go back to ease of exploit. So everyone freaked out over Spectre and Meltdown, the vulnerabilities that came out a few years ago, but it took 7 or 8 PhDs, like a year to exploit it. And I don't know about you, but I haven't pissed off 7 or 8 PhDs so badly that they're willing to work a year to try to attack me or my business. And so the ease of exploit on that was just through the roof. It was very, very high. And so the attention, yes, but the level of freak out from our industry, I found very interesting because I'm like, do we really think that, it was just very, very complex to exploit versus where there's already, modules in Metasploit and you can just click a button and it will just exploit the thing for you, right? And I want to know if a very advanced attacker is the only one that can use this, or if, any person like a script kiddie, someone who's not advanced, who has very little skill is able to exploit it, because then I'm a lot more afraid. Is your system public or is it internal only? Because then it's just people inside your network or who have gotten inside your network that you need to worry about, and you still need to secure it, but maybe not at the same level. If you find a vulnerability, what privilege can be gained by it? If none, then this will be 0 in your edition. But if they can gain extra privileges, that's really important to note. Has this vulnerability been known a really long time, or is this brand new? Does this affect your specific business? So if you, for instance, work in healthcare, you have different risks than the designer ice cream shop, right? What is the classification of the data contained within your system? If it's not labeled, you have to assume that it is the worst and most intense of all the different ones that you have. And this is unfortunately a reality for a lot of incident responders, that we go to respond to an incident and there's no labels for classification of the data. And then we have to assume the worst, and we have a worse day. And so if I can appeal to any of you, please label your data. Was the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of the system or the data negatively affected? And if so, how? Because then this definitely needs to go into your score. You can add all these things up. You can add anything specific that's for your business, but this is a really good starting point. Because then you might notice, oh, this system, like our automated tools, found a bunch of highs, but it's the internal lunch and learn calendar. And I'm just not going to freak out if someone does an exploit and then we can't see whose lunch is happening. Versus, this is the public calendar of our training that our training company does. And that would be very serious for your reputation if someone deleted that, changed it, removed all the people who registered for a course, etc. That would be really harmful to your business. So these are some things to consider. So now let's talk about some metrics that I like to gather, and I hope after this presentation you might want to gather. My eyelashes are bugging me, and I don't even have mascara on. So unfair. So let's talk about security metrics that matter. So first of all, time to detection. So if there's a vulnerability or there's a security incident or whatever, how long did it take us to notice this problem? Because apparently on average, it takes companies 264 days to notice that there has been a data breach. If that is you, that is fine, but you want to start measuring and figuring out ways to bring that lower. How long does it take you to fix or patch the problem so that it's no longer a thing? I have worked at many companies where we are awesome at finding vulnerabilities, but we never fix them. And then that's only literally half of our job. It's like exercising only one side of your body and then wondering why you walk crooked. So this is really important. If you have a baseline security posture that you want to get to, how close are you to it? And this usually means in the world of application security, okay, so we have brand new fancy apps and they're like here and they're reliably coming out here, and I'm very pleased with that. There's other apps that are in maintenance that are relatively new and they're here, and we're going to figure out how to make sure they're all always here. Then we have legacy applications and we rarely touch them, and they were here but we've brought them to here and now we can sleep at night. So I usually kind of budget them into 3 sections, and then it's like, how can we address all 3 sections? And we can't just ignore one of the sections because then life will be very bad in the future. Are you meeting your service level agreement with dev and ops? Are they constantly waiting on you? Are they not getting things that they need? What can we do to make sure that they are having their needs met by the security team? Whenever there are a bunch of emails in your inbox from devs asking for help and you haven't got back to them for a prolonged period of time, you should be aware they're building that feature anyway and they are guessing how to do it securely. So it's really important that you have a reasonable amount of time that you get back to them. Has the average number of vulnerabilities per system or app gone down over time? And if not, why not? So this goes back to when we were talking about, if you get a new tool and it suddenly is able to look for all sorts of new things and your number goes up, that's cool. But if you don't have a new tool and you didn't hire a new resource who's just really great at testing, or some other factor that would explain things going up or things just not going down, then you have a problem that you need to address. And it sounds counterintuitive, but I'd rather know the bad news than not know the bad news and not be aware that things aren't going well. Knowledge is power, and metrics are your superpower. Are you detecting the same types of vulnerabilities continuing to happen, or are they reducing? There's this one company that I worked with and they had one maintenance team, and so all these other teams were creating new apps all the time and features, and one team would maintain. So we would report security bugs and the maintenance team would just fix all the security bugs, choom, 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 choom. But because they were the ones learning security, because they were the ones fixing the bugs, the other ones just kept making the same security mistakes over and over. And then when we realized that, I was like, let's give everyone else security training, and then less bugs were going to the maintenance team. And then we had like this better, happier circle, if that makes sense. Are you able to detect new types of vulnerabilities? If your systems just keep seeing the same things over and over again, I feel that it is important to expand and start looking for new things. Sometimes this means doing a new type of testing. Sometimes this means getting a different tool. Sometimes this means getting an expert in to help you configure the tool so it does a better job. There's a lot of options, but it's really important to continue to try to find new and different types of vulnerabilities so you can make your app even more secure. So I give security training. So this is like a big one for me. If we do education on a topic, does the number of instances of that problem go down? This is super important. So I often talk about cross-site scripting, or basically input validation, output encoding, using store procedures, etc., like secure coding training. And then if they are continuing to make those mistakes that we drilled down on them, like that's a problem. But if we see that just like nosedive, like we stop seeing those mistakes that we've seen for so many years, it's like then you know that you actually got a return on your investment. And as an educator, this is great because I'm like, look at this awesomeness. But also for your org, you want to know that the training that you paid money for did the thing you want, because you don't want to just check a box. You don't want to spend X budget. You want to make your org more secure. And so measuring this is super important. Lastly, if you have some sort of campaign to try to target specific vulnerabilities or specific types of bugs, you want to measure that it's declining and that your efforts are working. And specifically, if you can measure different types of things, that would be even better. So let's give you an example. I worked somewhere and every app I tested just had cross-site scripting in like every single field. It was a really old company and they hadn't really had anyone doing application security before. They'd only ever had a pen test on their one brand new app. And so all their old apps, I'm like running scanners and clicking and poking things. I'm just like, it's like you couldn't have tried to put more cross-site scripting in it. So we did a lunch and learn on it. And then we would put all the scan results into Defect Dojo from OWASP, which is like a super cool vulnerability management tool. There's a bunch on the market. And then I would look at, okay, so this team actually attended the lunch and learn. You see that nosedive? You see that nosedive? Oh yeah. And then, oh, these other teams, like none of them did attend the lunch and learn. And see, I'm still seeing the same numbers from them. And it was amazing to watch. And so then, of course, we offered it again and again, right? And so targeting specific vulnerabilities and if they decline is awesome. Okay, so next, security incidents and the metrics that you can gather around that. So a security incident is the most humiliating and damaging and devastating way to deal with a vulnerability for the first time. It really is. If you can reduce the number of incidents, how long they take to resolve, how much they cost, the damage, anything you can do to make a security, like less security incidents, shorter security incidents, less harmful, is a huge, awesome, fantastic investment for your company, and you should definitely do it. And so let's talk about some incident metrics that matter. So every time you run a security incident, you need to write a security report and do a post-mortem, and you will use that information to gather your metrics. You can also do potentially gather metrics from other places, but those are the main things, so you have to do those every time. So first of all, how long did it take to resolve? And you need to be honest with yourself. So if you didn't actually close it out for 6 months, then you need to do that. If you didn't do the post-mortem for 6 months, but you actually finished it after 3 months, then you can say it's 3 months. But it's important not to like, oh, well, the last couple of weeks where we were recovering stuff, that didn't really count. No, it counts. That needs to be in there, because you don't know how much things really cost then. I've often seen managers saying, oh, well, we had to do, like 12 hours of overtime for these two things, and that's how much it cost. I'm like, no, dude, I didn't work on any of my projects for 3 straight weeks because of this. And so all of our projects got pushed back. And also I had to call this guy in, and then he had to restore the database, and that took all day. And then this other person helped me with that. And when you add all of that up, you're like, oh, that incident was actually very, very, very expensive. So it's really important to include that in your costs. How long did it take you to figure out that you had an incident? We've already talked about that briefly. But another part of this is, how long does it take to triage? So is it a security event? So it looks like a security thing happened, but we're not quite sure what's up, and it turned out to be fine? Or is this a real security incident and something happened? That triage time, the shorter that can be, the better, because then okay, get serious, launch the incident response process, like the full thing, or, okay, no, it's actually fine, we're okay, continue your days, false alarm. That's really important. I group all types of incidents into different categories. So obviously there's an AppSec, like software, custom software issues. Sometimes there's just the public being the public and doing just wacky things like sending in threats, or, your tool doesn't do this. It's like, we never said it did that. And so it's just like our customers are being zany and wild. And that's another category, and that's a thing you can't necessarily stop, or maybe you could have better documentation, etc. Right? And so if you categorize your incidents, that's really helpful, and you want to see if you're repeating the same kind and if you can do something to stop them. Was the incident response process followed by everyone, or just some people, or was it a free-for-all and no one followed it? This is really important. Total cost and damage. This doesn't have to be perfect to the dollar, but you can't, for instance, just record the overtime. Like I said, it has to be a realistic amount. Do you repeat the same types of incidents, or are you finding new types of incidents? Was it post-mortem? Do other teams understand what to do, and did they cooperate? Because I've had lots of times like did not cooperate, did not understand the process, did not this. And then I went through and with a colleague named Eric, who was amazing, and we made customized training for help desk. We made customized training for the sysadmins. We made customized training for the execs. For the execs, it was 5 minutes. If this happens, you call me. And then I made these little plastic business cards and handed them out to everyone, and everyone had these fancy badges to get in. I'm like, open your little fancy badge, put this in. If you suspect anything, you call me. The end. You call this number, someone will always answer it, and we got better results. And so quite often when people aren't cooperating, it's because they just haven't got the training and they don't understand. Was a postmortem and an incident report performed every time. Every quarter, I review the results and try to find patterns and see where I can prevent things. I suggest reviewing it. And so whether you've reviewed it or not is a metric. That's important, because if you go and you look and no one's actually looked at anything for a year and a half, you don't want to just review the last 90 days. You want to review all of that and see what types of trends that you can see. Time between incidents. So I used to work at Elections Canada, and you might realize and you might not realize, but running an election is really hard and it's a lot of work. And what they do is after each election, they actually plan time to rest the staff. And I remember thinking how that was super brilliant. And they're like, it costs a lot more money to burn out an employee than to treat them properly. So we've decided that we're just going to treat our employees really well, because that's better and because it's cheaper. Like, I'd rather just keep my employees healthy and make sure they have rest time. And so when I started working at other places, I would explain to them, like 3 out of every 4 weeks, I'm responding to security incidents. You have me staying late several nights, almost every week. I'm going to burn out or I'm going to find a different job. What you need to do is, in that case, let me launch an application security program so I can prevent a bunch of these incidents, like untie my hands and let me do my work. But it's really important. People talk about burnout and all this stuff, and they act like it's all the employees that should be taking care. You should just do self-care, blah, blah, blah. But really a lot, this is in the employer's hands, and they need to take responsibility too. Okay. Your access to the tooling was or was not available, period. If you don't have access to the tools you need to do the job, let's say you don't have access to the code, so then you can't scan and see if you actually have that library in that app that is known vulnerable, which there's this 0 day and everyone's exploiting it in the wild and you're super freaked out and your executive's like, is this us? If you can't even see where any of the code is and you don't have a tool so you can look and see which versions you're using, it's just an exercise in frustration. And so you need to mark down every time that you don't have access to a thing that your team needed access to and didn't have, and you need to correct that immediately. So these are some incident metrics that I have found that have mattered and that I have used to help me greatly reduce the number of incidents and how much they cost. But there'll be more, don't worry. So tools for measurement. If you are going to measure things, there are 3 things that I think is really important. So 1, you need the ability to be able to see patterns and trends. And years ago, I had a job managing top secret evidence, and I did a bunch of counterterrorism things. And so I'm at one with Microsoft Excel. And so I could take huge amounts of data and just smush them and change them and whirl them around, and then I can see patterns. But data scientists have super cool tools to look at things. You don't need to have that much, and you don't need to have amazing Excel foo. You need to have some sort of system that lets you visualize and see patterns. It doesn't matter what the system is, it only matters that it works for you and your team. I'm going to give you some samples and examples though. The ability to keep the information safe. This information is not information you want in bad hands, malicious hands, enemy hands. And it's really, really important that it is safe, the wrong people don't see it, and that it cannot be manipulated. So the integrity of this data is very, very important. And then the last one, and so this is sort of a bonus, but I mean, like, it just makes your life 1,000 times better, the ability to automate data collection. And so I was talking about Defect Dojo before. There's ThreadFix, there's Cloud Defense, I believe Weight Source just came out with a tool that does this, like vulnerability management systems that will automatically take the cool thing. They'll take all the scan results and automatically update them, but you can write your own Python script that does this. Let's talk about some tools. So I'm going to name a bunch of tools that I've seen people use, then I'm going to go through and tell you the 3 things not to do. Okay, so first of all, Microsoft Excel. Is it good for everyone? No, but do I love it? Yes. I'm going to actually go through and put an X and a check mark next to all of these. So keeping all your stuff in emails or documents in folders. Vulnerability management tools, so tools created just for this. Checking several different security dashboards. So imagine you have 10 security tools checking all 10 dashboards. Using other tooling dashboards like Airtable, Power BI, etc., that are not meant for vulnerability management, but like plugging that data in anyway and making your own dashboards. Using the dashboard of your cloud provider, assuming it accepts external information. So just like, a Power BI or Airtable or whatever can accept third-party information. If your cloud dashboard does this, you can feed all of it into there. Saving everything into a database and then querying it yourself. So the first one, Excel, I've seen this used and I've seen it work well. It doesn't work well with big teams, but if you're a small team, you can totally do this. Every time I've seen people save things into emails and documents and folders, a person quits and then there is a disaster. It never works out well. People will delete things out of folders. Someone moved stuff, you don't know where it is, disaster. Vulnerability management tools. They're made for this, so of course they work well. Checking several different security dashboards. This is a disaster. I've seen people pay for lots of different amazing companies. And yes, you can go in and let's say you have a SaaS tool, a DAS tool, and an IaaS tool. And yes, sometimes I just want to look at those things, but I need a place where I can put all of the data together and look at it together to make good program decisions. If you want to make your own dashboards, all the power to you. I have marketing students working for me, and one of them made some super fancy dashboards about what people like that I say on Twitter, which was hilarious because I am always surprised by what people like versus what people don't like. And I was mostly just laughing at my own jokes. Your cloud dashboard, if it can accept external information, is a super great place for you to look at stuff. And if you are a team of 1 or 2 and you're highly technical and you can query a database as though it's as natural as breathing, this totally works. Does this work for a really big team? Maybe not. Does this work for less technical teams? No, but I've seen this work really well. I don't care which one you do. Just please gather the metrics and automate as much as possible. If you have to manually put this stuff in, it will be painful and you won't be a happy person. So let's look at improvement. Think back to your security goals that we talked about for your program when we do this next slide. So for me, what I usually do with clients is I get all their scan results and then I educate everyone on the top 3 problems. And then we see those just go way down. If you are doing bug type eradication, you having metrics can help you just obliterate bugs. It's really, really cool. If you can automate some of your compliance, your life will be better in hundreds of ways. Compliance, so I think compliance is important and I think it gets a bad rap because it's not always implemented perfectly. However, you got to do it. So you might as well make it the least painful possible. Measuring if you're meeting your SLAs. And are the devs meeting their SLAs? Are the ops people patching at the rate that you've agreed upon? Oh yeah. Are you repeating the same type of security incidents? And are you able to detect new types of security incidents? This is super important. So we have a few minutes left and I'm going to do a case study. As a reminder, this is actually combined from 4 different workplaces because I didn't think I'd be allowed to do 4 case studies. But I wish I could have done all 4 cool, awesome things at the same place. Okay, so my goal basically everywhere is always to have less security incidents because although I'm fascinated by incident management, it stresses me out and I'd rather just do AppSec all day. I'm there when you need me, but I would rather be being my calm self, fiddling with pipelines and giving people some results and reviewing designs and stuff very calmly. So the first thing I did is I was like, okay, I want to reduce the number of AppSec incidents. How do I do this? So I brainstorm. We could reduce all of our incidents overall. That sounds nice, but that sounds out of scope. I have definitely had people suggest during these brainstorming sessions, well, we could just make our software more secure. Yes, that's what I do every day, all day. That's what I'm trying to do, yes. We could have better detection. So having better detection so you find things faster and that you don't miss anything is excellent. That's not going to cut our number of incidents, but I'd rather know than not know. So I'm like, okay. We could have automated responses. So that's cool. We could have better training for our staff. I'm like, so all of these are like, they're great ideas, but we're not measuring. So I'm not sure what we actually need. So I'm like, let's see if we have some metrics. And every place I work, they're like, oh, we don't really have metrics. I'm like, yes, you do. You have some metrics. You probably just don't look at it that way. Like almost every place I've ever worked has tons of scan results just all over the place. And then once I mash them all into Excel and do my kung fu on them, it's like, oh, actually, you don't have any injection problems basically, but you are apparently addicted to cross-site scripting and all of you hate security headers. So how about we talk about those things, right? And then we have a starting place to go from there. So first of all, let's look at what we have, right? So again, our goal was I always want to just greatly reduce the number of security incidents, period. So I looked at all the postmortem results and the incident reports, and I especially marked when there wasn't one. And then I'm like, oh, so what type of attack types did we have? And so I almost always see like that there's lots of cross-site scripting and things. That is a thing. It's a thing so often that I have a YouTube video that I just send to clients. I'm like, just play this because it's such a problem. What is the root cause? So what actually caused this incident? Is there insecure code? How was it allowed out that it was insecure? Was there no testing? Was there a super advanced attacker involved? Like, how did this come to be that this was in production? And where did we miss things? Do we not have a process for that? Do we have a process, but we didn't at the time? How did this happen? Did everyone follow the process? I also always look at different categories of incidents, and I try to figure out which one we are falling prey to most often. One or two usually stick out above the rest, and so I try to focus my efforts on where I can make the most benefit the fastest. Whether you're an employee or you're a consultant, this is good, but especially if you're a consultant so that you can show value to your client immediately. But as an employee, you want to do this too. Okay, so again, we still have the same goal. So I also looked at like how long did it take for us to do our incidents, right? Did it take a really long time? And so one workplace, it took forever. Like simple things like weeks and weeks and weeks. And I was like, this cannot happen. How well did your team respond and did they make errors? How well did our team respond? Or did other teams respond? And did they make errors? Did they follow the process? Did they cooperate? Because sometimes there's no cooperation. And if not, why not? And I try not to make assumptions because I find whenever I make assumptions, I'm wrong. And then I have egg on my face and then I have to apologize. Did your team have the tools and resources they needed to respond well? How long did it take you to find this? How long did it take to clean up? And how much did this mess cost? So let's look at all that. So then I want to gather stuff that I don't have. So there's missing metrics. So if some of that information is not available, sometimes you can go get it. Sometimes you can't. But I find talking to people works surprisingly well. And if you're the first person to ask them, they usually talk your ear off, which is fantastic. So I went and talked to people. So I got new information. So the executives at every place I've ever worked has told me that 0 days are really important to them, even though almost all things that are exploited are not 0 days. And they're like, this is top priority. And I'm like, you signed my paycheck, so I am going to take that into serious consideration. Then one workplace, it took forever to finish incidents. It took forever for them to be passed over. It took forever to finish. It was just, that's what was costing so much. We didn't have very many incidents. It's just they took forever to close out. One place, 35% of all of our incidents were caused by just 2 types of vulnerabilities. It turned out we loved coding those little vulnerabilities into every one of our apps. And it was shocking. And lastly, I went and spoke to the devs and was asking them about stuff, and they said, actually, you know what's super annoying? People keep like doing stuff to our APIs, like there's all these bots, and then they keep making our APIs crash, and then we've been getting these really big cloud bills, and they just keep calling and calling and calling, and it's like not our client, and we don't know what to do. So it turned out there was a bunch of attacks happening and incidents happening, and no one was telling me because they didn't know it was a security incident. And so they hadn't even realized I could come help with that. So I was like, devs, I'm your friend, let's fix this. So then I adjusted my goals, right? So first of all, this goal didn't make sense anymore, right? So we readjusted our goal. So I wanted to make the incidents take way shorter to finish, and I wanted handover to our team to be like that. I didn't want people attacking our APIs anymore. I wanted the executives to feel comfortable about the 0-day problem. And so let's readjust, right? So new goals. Reduce how long it takes to close out an incident by 50%. And to do this, we created ourselves, just our team, and this was before I was a trainer. This was when I first started doing public speaking, and I assure you, I sucked. So this was fairly terrifying for me. So we created team-specific training. So we trained help desk, we trained the sysadmins, we trained the project manager, we trained the executives, and just told them what we needed from them. They started passing things to us like this. They started calling us and telling us everything. Suddenly we had this amazing like onslaught of information, and we finally knew what was going on, and life was good. We updated our incident response process and documentation so that everyone had access, and we started doing like this yearly refresh on that. And new employees also got an email with some information as well. And then we made an app inventory, because part of the problem was we would get past an incident and then we had no idea who to talk to. And so the app inventory gave us contact information, where the code was and stuff, so I would do as much as I could without interrupting the dev teams. Life got way better. Another new part of the goal, let's appease the executives. So I'd always wanted a RASP, but I couldn't afford it with my budget. So then I explained how you can implement a virtual patch with a WAF or a RASP. And then I got it approved. So like a RASP was just this like a thing I wanted, but I didn't feel I could justify. And then when I explained that then I could respond to 0 days like this, I got my budget. Yes. And so it turned out like listening to the execs got me a thing I really wanted, and they got a thing that they really wanted. Another goal. So reducing the number of AppSec incidents by 35% by eliminating those 2 bug classes that were just, they're all over us. And so we targeted these 2 bug types and found that we kept finding. And we did this by doing unit tests, by doing scans, and then I taught all the devs what to look for and how to just squash it. And then basically it just started disappearing from scans. The next 6 months, they just started disappearing. And then I didn't have any new incidents. And then I was a happy lady. I didn't have any of those types of new incidents. Incidents still happened, but I didn't see those. Injection's terrifying. Okay, and then the last one, reduce resource abuse. So this was an incident that was happening. I had no idea it was happening. And so I proved how much this was costing in our cloud bills, and I proved that, they're knocking down our APIs and it's such a pain. So I convinced the team, we put money together and we got DOS protection, denial of service protection, from our cloud provider. And that helped a lot. We also implemented an API gateway for that one. So they had a set of APIs that went through one gateway, but lots of companies now have implemented gateways, and we turned on resource quotas and throttling. And then basically the bots could only get a little bit, and then they got kicked out, and our customers weren't getting, 404s when they were trying to call our APIs. The devs were happy, and our cloud bill went down. So it did kind of go up because of the DOS protection, but it went down because we weren't paying for a bunch of bots to constantly interact with our APIs. So overall, maybe it cost around the same, but the devs were happy. We're offering way better security. We're offering way better service. And yes, DOS protection isn't cheap, but totally worth it. And so if you think about it, like that's amazing, right? So then like the next step here is the game plan, but I'm just going to repeat the things that we did. But like, we couldn't have done those things without metrics. I couldn't have done those things and improved things so much if I hadn't known, if I didn't have the data. And these are like, you have different ideas that I don't have. And when we put our two heads together, we can have even more brilliant ideas. And so part of this is about talking to people and sharing the data when you're allowed to, so that then you can get the things going. Because originally I was just going to educate the devs and do lots of scans. And one of them said, I can write a unit test for that. Do you want me to? And then the other person said, hey, can we copy that unit test when you're done so we don't have to write it ourselves? And then one guy was writing unit tests for everyone. And I was like, I could kiss you, but then HR will come get me. So it was great, right? So with that, oops, there we go. Oops, here we go. Yes. So metrics changed every single thing about our goal. And we got so much more than we bargained for, basically way better security. Like whenever you do steps to help mitigate or prevent incidents, you're always going to end up with a better security posture. It's kind of like a 2-for-1. It's awesome. So I would like to humbly suggest that you consider this book. So I read this book and it got my brain just focusing on metrics over and over and over again. I got really excited about it. This might be a book you like. I'm going to recommend this book again with some other books in 2 slides. So to review, things we learned, the value of metrics and how we can use them to report to management, but also so that we can improve and get better and do a better job. We learned about, what vanity metrics are, and hopefully I've helped you identify some of them so you'll be able to look at things and be like, oh yeah, but what value does that offer? It doesn't offer value. So maybe it's a vanity metric versus metrics that truly matter and get you what you need. And then how to apply that information so you could get the best results. And so now I have some resources for you. So first of all, like I said, awesome books. So obviously my book is on this slide, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And I have good news. Starting March 20th, I am starting the live discussions that the book talks about. So whether you have the book or not, you can go to aliceandboblearn.com and sign up to get invites once a month for open discussions about the questions at the end of every chapter. So I'm inviting a bunch of key industry experty AppSec nerds to come hang out with me, and you can ask questions via YouTube and discuss with us. And we're going to talk about secure code, security requirements, secure design, like everything. And I'm really excited. But all these books helped me be the security professional I am today. And so I just want to recommend them. If you are a woman, and if you're at Techno Day, you probably are. And by woman, I mean non-binary folks, just the widest definition you can imagine of woman or gender non-conforming. If you want to make lots of other women friends, WOSEC, Women of Security, would love to meet you. So you can join our online little platform. It's free. Come hang out with us. We have online events. And, before COVID, we used to get together and brunch every month and do all these things. We have chapters all over the world, and we have online events so people that aren't in a city that has a chapter can join us. You can follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we basically just tweet awesome stuff women are doing. We're like, she's awesome, she's awesome. So if you want the stream of women being amazing, you should follow us, and we'd love to meet you. And second last of the resources, I have a podcast. It's called the We Hack Purple Podcast. If you have a podcast app, you can get us, or you can come live and hang out with me and my guest. And by hang out, I mean you're on YouTube in the comment section, and then me and my guest are live. But I basically interview lots of different types of people to learn about all the different types of jobs that exist within information security. And it can be really enlightening to hear what it's like, to be an architect versus an incident responder versus digital forensic investigator, etc. I found it enlightening, and quite frankly, a lot of my guests are just so cool. Every Monday, on Twitter, I run this thing called Cyber Mentoring Monday. So there's a whole bunch of us now. And every Monday I use this hashtag to try to help connect people with professional mentors. And there's several of us doing this. And so if you are a veteran and you know lots of stuff about security, it's been a long time, you could answer someone who is calling out asking for assistance or advice, and you will make their entire year. And if you are new, having someone else reach out to you and then have a virtual meetup with you online, or you know what, this book is what changed my career, or this podcast is the best, or oh, let's talk about this, like what do you need? It's been pretty magical to see so many people in the industry coming together, volunteering to help new people join our field. It's pretty amazing. And then lastly, I am a resource. I have the We Hack Purple company, and we have like some free training and all sorts of other things that we do. And then there's me, She Hacks Purple, which is sort of my online name. I have a YouTube channel, I have a blog. I'm a nerd on the internet. Oh yeah, and basically, come hang out. We definitely want you in our industry. We need you in our field. And I want to thank you for coming to this conference. And I want to thank the organizers because this conference is amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for coming to my talk. And thank you for fighting the good fight with all of us here at Techno Day. Thank you.